This is Brad Wild, and we are in Charlotte, North Carolina, and before us is the Carenado Fokker 50. This is my replacement airplane for the old Dash, I don't know if it was 8 or 7 Q400, which was great back in X-Plane 10 days, but this is uses a newer FMS, the default FMS from Laminar. So the avionics are a little bit better, and you get the same wonderful detailing that you would normally get with Carenado, and this airplane is somewhat immersive compared to others. A lot of the buttons actually work, so I like that kind of thing. So let's take a ride. Well, maybe we should take a look at the airplane from the exterior. It's got baggage door and I guess a door for supplying the galley. There is a rear door in the back, I guess for emergencies, but let's go ahead and lock things up and take a look at the cockpit. The one really odd thing is where the yoke is. It covers up the PFD and the EHSI, so I'm not quite sure what the thinking was there, but I mean, it's not Carenado's fault. It's probably how the airplane really is. So fortunately, you can pop these out, and it even has an autopilot pop out, which doesn't really work for me. I'm having problems with my trackpad. The buttons work, but the roller switches don't. I'm probably going to have to go back to my mouse. Well, where are we going before we get too far along here? So here's Charlotte, and we're going to fly down to Charleston, Kilo Charlie Hotel Sierra, and it will be an IFR flight. We've got some weather in front of us, and this will be our, let's show you where we are in relationship to our runway. We're parked right here. This is a corporate aircraft that I've rigged up, and we'll be taking off on runway 23, and then we'll pick up the Knights to Sid, and our transition point will be Hamlin, and we will be using Osprey 7 for our star, and we'll be landing on runway 33, and we will be landing on runway 15, and we'll shoot an RNAV approach. Notice it's an LPV, so the most precise of these kinds of approaches. The wind is relatively light out of the south-southwest, so I don't think we should have any issues landing on runway 15. So, like we start all flights, we'll go with, turn down the sound a little bit. Start with the battery. And eventually all these lights need to be off, white and amber. And when we do a battery start, just pumps 2 on each side. And how about some lights? This is the overhead, and all these are backlighting. This is underneath the glare shield. And then anti-collision. That is the rotating beacon. There isn't, at least that I can find, a separate strobe light. It just happens to be nav. So when you turn on the nav lights, you get the strobe lights. So we've got 2 FMSs. I'm going to pop it out. I don't know why it says nav data out of date. I just used the FMS updater from Navigraph, but At least I have last month. I'm sure we'll be fine. Okay, flight plan. And if you click, you get the ability to use your keyboard. So Charlotte down to Charleston. Kilo Charlie Hotel Sierra. Our departure, runway 23. Night 2, Hamlin transition. Execute. So we'll pick our star, Osprey. We'll be transitioning at unjam. Our approach will be 15Y. And our transition, let's go with Poets. Execute. And just clean out our discontinuities. Put unjam down in the scratch pad and select that. And see what else we have. We have another one here. Take care of that. And our cruise altitude, let me execute. Cruise altitude, let's go with flight level 210. So we are set in terms of programming our FMS. And we can get things started up. So ignition on, and this is a momentary start. And I'm watching this NH gauge here, and when it reaches 20, I move our fuel level up to start. Sounds are pretty realistic. Left engine. And when it reaches the green, I can move the fuel level lever up to open. And now I'm at 20 for the left. And wait for this needle to climb up to the green. And fuel up to open. And one thing that you'll learn when you buy this airplane, I learned it the hard way. Notice that I'm moving my joystick and nothing is happening. That's because there's a lock on it by default on the yoke itself. And it's kind of tricky. I wish it was easier. So now we should be fine. That's why they always have you check all your surfaces to make sure they're free. And so I found out the hard way. Back up to our panels. Finish turning on the fuel pumps and generators, packs, bleeds. Probe heat. We do not need these on anymore. Again, all switches off, or at least all switches not lit up. Taxi light. And our altitude. I think the service ceiling on this airplane is 25. flight level 250. Want to check our baro. It's 3000. Parking brake off. So I'm not sure why the strobes are on. This has happened once before. Anyway, I've got a support ticket I'm working on for Carenado. I don't know if that's a feature or bug, as they say. So let's set our flaps to 2. And our transponder on. We'll take a look around the cabin in just a minute. That switch looked like it was on from the outside. Park brake off. Throttles forward. No first officer callouts. At 100, rotate. Gear up. It's a big gear. Flaps 1. Flap 0. Begin our turn towards the south. This airplane has a good climb rate. Again, we can pop these out. Come in handy. Since you can see they're behind the yoke. All right, autopilot, nav, vertical speed. Taxi light off. So we're climbing about almost 3,000 feet a minute, still maintaining about 170 knots. One thing I should point out, you have to make sure that your selector is on FMS. And you do have some options. You can change the size of this. And you get some, whoops, let me try that again. You can get a map and you can see our route here. Hopefully we'll intercept it and turn. which we are. And it took me a while to find this, but you can adjust the range down here. I wasn't able to turn off the clutter. I couldn't find anything to do that. The other thing I looked for was the time, the clock. So it's tucked away again behind the yoke. On our way to Charleston. You can see the airport behind us. Now we won't be able to maintain this all the way to flight level 210. I should say we won't be able to maintain the airspeed, so let's adjust that. And this is where I wish my autopilot panel worked. So we'll lower the nose a little bit. So you really need a shortcut key so you can quickly look down there, because this just doesn't work. It looks like it will, but I've tried it to no avail. Now these switches work. Anything that's a push button works fine. We're just about to our transition altitude of flight level 180. So I'll change my baro to standard, or try to get close. Maybe the button will do it. Yep. Great. There is a push button. Now our power is only showing about 65%, and I've got the throttle all the way up, so I think as we climb it comes down. Not sure why. So we are close to Walnut, which here's Hamlin, and Walnut is somewhere in between here. Out the cabin windows, left and right. Empty. But there are galleys. So flight level 210. So we've got our cloud cover that we saw on our map a little bit earlier. And let's check our top descent, just 6 miles away. I want to set a target altitude of 3,000 feet. Remember, our initial approach fix is Poets, and it's showing no procedure turn. So I know I was questioning that before in my mind, but none of these require procedure turn. So we'll just be going straight in, and we should be picking up our vertical guidance at least 1,600 feet, if not before. Usually you pick it up before, at least in X-plane you do. So set this for 3,000. If you don't set it, it won't descend. So we can go ahead and start that process. So vertical speed and set my descent maybe 1,000 feet. And you can see that set right here. There's a little bug, that little magenta bug. And I'm monitoring my descent. We need to be at just about 13,000 in 28 miles. There's that annoying speed bug, speed warning. So come back on my throttle. I should have anticipated that. When you push the nose down, you're going to pick up speed. These are laminar clouds. I'm running a Mac with the metal option and SkyMax. It took me a second to remember that. SkyMax Pro does not work with it. So I'm stuck with the cotton clouds of X-Plane. Sad. I hope they figure that out someday. How about a little progress update? We are approaching Turtles, which is right here. So we've got a little bit of a dog leg. I suppose I could have straightened this out if I was thinking ahead. So next is Osprey, which is our transition. And then Poets is where we begin our final approach. Now it's showing 4,500 feet. And if you look at our chart, so the option here is anywhere between 6,000 and 3,000. But I would like to now go back to our arc so that I can monitor that final approach. I like to keep my FMS tucked down in the corner so that I can reference altitudes. There is nothing automated about this. You have to do it yourself until you pick up that glide path on that LPV approach. And that we pick up again somewhere between Maymay and Anur. We begin our turn towards the runway, and things will start to get a little bit more interesting. Descending down to 3,000, where we will hold at Maymay. Steady at 3,000. We'll dial in our 1,600 feet and click on VAP. I'm not familiar with the word or the initials VAP, but they appear in this airplane, but it does the same thing. It begins our RNAV approach. You also use it in this airplane for the ILS, but you have to press it. And let's descend down to 1,600 or close to it. And down in the lower right-hand corner on our arc, you can see the green G, which stands for glide path in this case. So we are below the glide path and we will be intercepting it, and as we do, you will see that begin to come down. But we're going to descend a bit to pick it up. I lost a little speed there when we leveled off. It's taken a while to get used to controlling these turboprops. They don't spool up instantly, so you have to think ahead. So we are lined up horizontally with the runway, as our yellow arrow indicates. Was a little aggressive there in my descent. And I'm hoping that we will see our vertical indicator begin to drop before we get to a newer bit of a cloud deck to pass through. Just 2 miles to the point where we should pick up our glide path. So I've turned off vertical speed for right now, and you can see the vertical indicator on our on our EHSI begin to drop. And we should see the nose come down as that G gets closer to the center point. Gear down. And you can hear the outer marker, which I think in this case is an ADF, or a non-directional beacon. I'm just checking to make sure that I'm able to reverse the engines. There is a stop there that by default is usually on. Now with the gears down, we can turn on our taxi light, and we'll start adding in flaps as we get closer.
1,000.
I can watch the vertical guidance indicator. I think it's called vertical deviation indication on the PFD. So next stop will be runway 15. And there's our runways. We dip below the clouds. So I still have autopilot engaged, still relying on that LPV guidance.
500. 400. 300. 200.
All right, my airplane, autopilot off.
100.
Looks like we were getting a little bit low there.
I should point out that this airplane does have
30.
reverse prop.
20. 10.
Didn't really need it there, but it does require
All right.
pull off this little switch.
That wasn't too bad. We can make the first intersection, or we can stop and clean up the airplane. So we'll turn off the strobes and landing lights. Flaps 0. And now we can proceed to our parking spot. We have to settle for corporate parking. So as we taxi to our final resting spot, a few observations. I think this is a great airplane. It's well worth the $39 US. As far as I'm concerned, it's immersive enough to make it challenging. Everything seems to work well, even though some of the avionics are a little antiquated. But it's satisfying to fly. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 for a mid-range airliner. I guess in the retro class, being that it's been around for a while. And it's a great replacement, as I said, for the Dash Q400, which I kind of miss, because there's still a lot of those flying. Okay, time to shut this thing down. So, fuel off. And let's just turn off our taxi light. I like how the doors come down slowly, as they would in real life. So that about does it for today. Till the next flight, this is Brad Wild. Thanks for tuning in.